It's really hard to find a good mod list for Bannerlord that actually works for a whole campaign without crashing, and in this guide, I'll share one I've spent over 250 hours testing and playing with. I'll cover mod options and settings as well. You can find the complete list in the description, links to each mod, and the install order that I'm using. Let's get started. Starting off at the top of our list, we've got these support mods: Harmony, Butterlib, UI Extender EX, and Mod Configuration Menu V5, or sometimes known as MCM. These 4 mods are necessary so that you can get the rest of the mods working, so you do have to have these. This is the version that I have for this mod list. However, I think some of them might have been updated since I last updated these. It's usually best to go with the most up-to-date version of these. However, if it doesn't work, you could always fall back to a slightly older version because, like I said, this whole mod list has been tested and it is working with these exact versions. And then after that, you've got the rest of the base game. The one thing you don't see on here is going to be fast mode. If you have fast mode enabled, just be aware that that speeds up in-game time so that your people age a lot faster. You can use your kids sooner. Instead of having to wait a full 18 years in-game, it goes a lot faster. I chose not to use fast mode, so that's why you don't see it in here. But yeah, that's basically where we're working with. So I do also have war sales active for these, and a lot of these mods do require war sales. So be aware of that. If you're playing modded Bannerlord, then you'll love the sponsor of this video, War Thunder. War Thunder is the most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever made, available now for free on PC, consoles, and mobile. Experience total immersion with their legendary X-ray damage model, where you'll see shell penetration, spreading shrapnel, and other physics-based simulations. No tailworld's math here. Join 95 million players and take command of over 2,500 tanks, planes, helicopters, and ships from 10 major nations. We're talking air-to-air combat, ground-to-air, ground-to-ground, sea-to-sea, you get the picture. There's no game better suited for fans of military history. And right now, you can get a massive jumpstart. Click the links in the description to claim this limited time offer bonus pack for new PC and console players, or returning players if you haven't played in the last 6 months. You'll get 100,000 Silver Lions, plus a 50% booster, 7 days of premium account, a 7-day rental of a P40E1, and an M4A2 tank, including the unique skins and Eagle of Valor decorations to keep forever. Download War Thunder for free at the link below, and I'll see you on the battlefield. Now back to the mods. Up next is Better Time. This mod adds an extra speed setting, extra fast forward. In the base game, you only have 3: pause, play, and then fast forward. And in this one, you get an extra fast forward, which you can actually adjust the speed of all of these. You can see here regular, fast, and then extra fast. It really, you got to be careful. It speeds it up incredibly fast. If you don't have a lot of scouting, it's very easy to accidentally run into somebody and get caught. So unless you're like a massive army, I don't usually recommend moving around extra fast forward unless you have a lot of vision around you. But my personal settings, my fast forward button is 4, extra fast forward is 10. And then I forgot to mention, if you're just sitting in town and waiting and you need it to go really fast, you could do control plus space and you can get up to 20. Again, you can adjust this however you want. You can get up to 128 speed, which is really, really, really fast. So let's show you control space. It's just, you're going to get caught by something. So usually if you're trying to pass time in a town or something, you're waiting for something to happen, you could do that. But I wouldn't really recommend it for traveling on the map so much. But that's Better Time. Up next, let's talk about a couple banner editing mods. So starting with the most important one is called Banner Editor. This gives you several banner layers. It also gives you a ton of customizations here. So you can adjust the position where things are on your banner, the size, you can adjust different color schemes, and they give you a massive amount of color schemes, both primary and secondary color. As you can see on this banner, I didn't really do too much with the color, but I did add a triangle towards the bottom, and then I had these 3 shell shapes. So you can see the first layer is for the triangle, and then 1 layer for each shell, and then you can resize them and reposition them. This is to try to mimic what the John Hawkwood banner would have looked like. There's some better examples. Let me show you those. So I did these custom by hand as well. So this is the English banner. Now, the banner editor is the one that allows you to add all these layers and stuff. There's another mod called Historical Banner Icons. Now, this one adds a huge, you can see how small this scroll thumb is. So there's a ton of stuff that was added here. And I'm not going to obviously show you all of them, but I was able to find a decent amount of the ones that we use that were used on historical banners. So for example, the fleur-de-lis, and then the lions, and then obviously you can do the checkerboard pattern, and then I layered it with 4 different patches for each corner, and then essentially just move them around, change the color so that it would match the banner during the 100 Years' War. Now I was even able to create the Duchy of Milan's banner, so you can see they've got all the historical icons that you would need. You just need to have a little bit of patience here and to construct them on the layers. So essentially just start with whatever the background is, get your colors matched up, and then you add a layer, and then you basically find whatever icon you need, and then you resize it and relocate it. You can see here, you can reposition everything. That's for the background though. That's probably not what we want. So we can reposition this if we want to get rid of the bird or move him over and all that. I don't want to mess with this because I spent a really long time getting these set up, but it's not too hard once you get the hang of messing with it. But yeah, you can create just about any banner that you want. Now, another mod that's part of the banners that were changed is the AI banner icons. So if you look at some of these banners over here, so looking at the Khazate banners, some of these are from the base game, like this one's from the base game. This one is definitely not. So this one changes. Now I went ahead and overwrote most of these so that it would look somewhat consistent for like a whole country. This was my doing for my specific campaign, but if you just want more of like a generic, all the original factions from the base game, but you want them to have a little bit different flair, you can get the AI banner icons and it'll change them up so that they don't look like the base game. So like this flag looks a lot better. This is like the Tengri symbol. And this one I believe is unchanged. Some of them are unchanged, but a lot of them do look a lot better. So pretty cool mod. Like I said, I didn't use most of it because I made my own banners. Oh yeah, actually you can see down here, these are very different. So some like Arabic writing. So that is pretty much it for the banner mods that I have. A lot of customization, and even if you don't want to mess with the customization, the AI banner icons is kind of nice to have. Definitely check those ones out. Up next, let's look at Bannerlord Expanded Companion Expanded mod. Now this one has a few different features. The main one though is that you can configure how many companions are in the tavern at any specific town. So this is hard-coded so that if you hire somebody and you exit and you come back, it'll refill pretty quickly. So you can essentially get as many companions as you want. This is great for a campaign where you're trying to hire a lot of companions. And we'll go over a mod soon that shows you how to increase the companion limit. But this one will also allow you to mix up the type of companions that are here. You can see there's no duplicates, and when you have this many companions on the map, I have it set to have at least 5 per tavern. You can go less, you can go more, but you're going to get a lot of duplicates. But you can also adjust so that you don't have a bunch of duplicates, and each one is going to be unique. There's a setting in here where as you go to towns, people will seek you out and try to join your party, things like that. There's a few other features that I didn't really get into using, but if you go to the mod page, you'll be able to see it there. But this is a great one, specifically if you're looking to hire a lot of companions. I don't think for a base game this is critical, although it can help you if you're trying to find a companion and you don't want to go to like 10 different settlements to try to find the right one. So this could be helpful for that. Now let's talk about one of my favorite mods that I don't really play without anymore, and that is Character Reload. There's so many features of this mod, I probably won't have time to go over everything, but the main ones that I use it for. Number one is if I want to change the appearance of anybody in the map. So for example, if I go back out, the base game starts England, what I call Britannia, off as Caladog. This is obviously not Caladog because I went in and I changed his appearance. So very different. You can do that for anybody on the map, not just your own character. So obviously you can do that with your own character from the start of the game. You can do it at any point. But essentially with this one, you can do it with anybody on the map. You could also change their names. You can edit their stats. So this is one of the big ones that I use it for. And you can see here, if you're going to do a heavy companion campaign, it's really nice to have a template where everything is zeroed out. Otherwise you're coming in here and you're doing it manually. So you have to drop all these, drop it to 0, get rid of all the perks. You can do it by doing it once and then creating a template. You can reset all the perks, focus points, levels, reset all your attributes, get rid of the bad traits you don't want. So sometimes if you're trying to sack settlements or whatever, and you've got companions that have traits, say like honor, and you sack it, they're not going to be too happy. If you do it enough times, they will leave your party. So you can get rid of annoying things like that if you want, or you could just make yourself incredibly overpowered. You can do the same thing for all your companions. You just set a template out and then go from there. So again, I don't use this too much to cheese the game, but it is incredibly helpful if you're trying to set up a companion only campaign and you need to have templates where you don't want to have to go back in and set everybody manually. Because as you can see here, I have a lot of companions, 110 plus family members, and to have to go in and do that for every single one is a huge pain in the butt. There's a lot of other things though. You can do relationship manager. So if you want to increase relations with somebody, you can do that through here. You just need to find them in the encyclopedia, click on relationship manager, and then you can adjust it. You can edit equipment or edit troops. This is the same feature that you have if you do console commands. So if you don't want to have to go through and use the console commands, I can just come in here. Let's say you want to edit equipment, and you could do this for anybody. If you want to do this for enemy parties as well, let's say you want to get the enemy commander to be completely dripped out, you can go do that. So you can see right here, I have access to every single item in the game, which is on the left side. So if we want to go to weapons, let's find the most expensive weapon, which is one that we made ourselves, a crafted weapon. You could just go in here and start dropping it wherever you want. So like I said, pretty cool, very helpful. You could do the same thing with troops. So if you're trying to set up a battle against an enemy, you can give yourself troops. You can take away enemy troops. You can give them even better troops. You can set it up to get the battle just the way you want. This is the way that I do a lot of my testing. So before I would use the custom battle mode, but I noticed custom battle doesn't exactly follow the same battle patterns as the base game when you're in actual combat. So I will typically do my testing here. If you're trying to set up tests, or if you want to do like a cool historical battle, I would probably do it through this. So you just edit troops for both sides, add whatever troops you need or take them away, and then build the army from scratch by doing that. Not too hard to do. There's a lot of other features here, which like I said, I'm not going to go over everything, but if you want to add money, you can add money to either yourself, obviously if you do it to your own character, or you can go to any clan and add money to them. Movement speed, prisoners, like everything that you think about adjusting in the game, you can adjust with character reload. It's really, really handy if you're trying to create a unique campaign. If you're trying to cheese the game or cheat or any of that stuff, it's also great for that. So no talking bad about that, but it does allow you to do any of that. But that is Character Reloader. Highly recommend this mod. Even if you don't use 90% of this, there is something in there that you will probably end up using. Next mod is a very small one called Career Experience. This sets your minimum experience rate. So let's say you would normally cap out and your experience rate would go to 0. You can actually increase that number so that you never cap out and you can just keep going, even if you don't have focus points or attribute points. This is really useful for companion-only campaigns because you can set a minimum experience rate and then just increase the XP gain rate on another mod that we'll talk about. And then you don't have to deal with fiddling with focus points and attribute points for 110 people. You just kind of set it like this and they will passively gain whatever activity that they're doing at a decent enough rate. This is what I have mine set at, 3.25. And then if we go over here, you can see it's not 3.25, it's actually a little higher than that. And that's because there's a base rate and some other things going in there. But essentially this makes it so that you will never have a category stay at 0 if you don't want it to stay at 0. If we were to grab a crossbow, even though we don't have any focus points into there, we would still be able to level this one up pretty decently. But more importantly, not so much for your main character, it's really helpful for your companions. So you can see here, they're stuck at the 3.25 cap, even though they've gone well above and beyond what the hard cap should have been based on how many controlled and throwing focus points that they have. So really handy little mod if you're going to be doing a campaign like this. Up next, there's two mods. One of them is a support mod, and the main one is True Battle Loot. So True Controller you need to be able to use True Battle Loot. So just be aware there's two mods that you need for this, but only one of them are functional. So True Battle Loot. If we would normally take a fight like this, you'd get a decent amount of loot, but you would not get a tremendous amount, right? Only 92 people there. So let's go ahead and send our troops. We come all the way over here to the loot screen. You can see we have a tremendous amount of loot and very expensive loot. So like I said, you would not normally get this much from a small battle like this, but with True Battle Loot, you can adjust this. You can set the minimums so that you can get plenty of loot from these guys. I typically will only use this if I'm doing an extreme challenge where we have to equip all of our troops without buying anything and we have to loot all of our gear. Otherwise, it's not particularly balanced. Even doing it like this, it's not balanced at all. Like you get loot maybe a bit too fast. I would probably turn this down a little bit, but you can see you get a tremendous amount of loot from battles, and those big battles they're even worse. But let me go into the settings here. So down here under the true mods, you can see battle loot. We have max gold reward set at whatever the max is, max value of looted items, and then max number of items per enemy. You could even get more. So you know how people have 5 slots for gear, 5 slots for armor. So you know how people have 5 slots for armor and then 5 slots for weapons. So right now we're only getting 5. We're only basically getting half. You can actually increase this up to 10 and you basically get everything from them. And then you can opt to share with your party if you want. I just decided not to do that. And then guaranteed share of the leader. There's a bunch of little options you can switch with this, but essentially you're just going to get a lot more loot if you want. And then obviously you can scale these back if it's just too overpowered, which it definitely is in this case. Up next, let's talk about RTS Camera mod. So you can see here in the base game, you move around at normal speed. With RTS Camera, one of my favorite functions, and this is not really what this mod was meant for, but this is how I personally use it. You can speed up in-game time in battles, specifically in battles. So you can go up to 3x speed. So if you're trying to do some of the grindy stuff like traverse one of the maps. Another one of my favorite uses is if you've got a very easy fight that you just can't be bothered to fight, but you also don't want to deal with auto-resolve and losing half of your elite troops. You just sit back, set it on 3x speed. Your troops will go out and fight on their own, do it very quickly, and you don't have to take the losses from auto-resolve. Now let's talk about how you can actually command your troops if you want. So if you press F10 mid-battle, you actually go into top-down mode where you can fly around. Now, I can still select my troops, 1, 2, all that stuff like normal, and then it's much easier to draw out your troops. I personally don't really use this mod this way. I've used it in the past for guides to make it easier to tell what's going on, but for an actual campaign, I'd rather be on the ground. But if you want to do it, more power to you. It's the same way commanding as in the base game. You know, you use your numbers, and then you just select troops to attack, or you can move people around, do whatever you want. It just makes it easier because you're top down, and then you can zoom around the map without having to be stuck to a horse or on foot. Let's talk about how to adjust your settings. So anytime you're in battle, if you're in town, in a village scene, you're walking around, press L on your keyboard and it's going to bring up this menu. Now, most of the stuff I'm not going to go over. You can mess with it if you want. If you want to use this to speed the game up, you're going to be looking at slow motion factor right here. So by default, you can slow the game down, which is, I think it starts out at like 0.4 or 0.5, something like that. And then if we were to press that button, it would actually slow the game down. Instead, crank this all the way to the right. That'll increase it 3x speed. And then you also have to configure a hotkey. So in the top left, click configure. And then for your slow motion, add a shortcut. And I have it set to one of my mouse buttons because I use it all the time. You can set it to whatever you want, but you set up a hotkey right here so you can do it without having to go to the menus and all that stuff. Because as of right now, you have to come in here and do it like this, I believe. So set yourself a hotkey, crank it up to 3x. If you want to command troops, press F10. Otherwise, you should be good to go. So that is RTS Camera. All right, let's talk about RBM. So it's going to be difficult to show off all the features of RBM because I also have some other mods active that change a lot of the features of RBM. But you'll notice compared to the base game, you see this posture system active. So every time you attack, every time you block, every time you are blocked, it uses some of your posture. It's essentially like an endurance system. So if you run out of endurance, you're going to be too tired to block or attack. So obviously, you would have something bad happen to you, like you fall on the ground. In this game, there's not too many good ways of representing that mechanic. So instead, what happens is your opponent or you get staggered. So you'll see that they kind of like flounder, and then you basically get a free hit. The same thing happens if you have a shield, but it basically just tries to slow down combat so that you can't just swing wildly, because if you keep hitting people and you don't have any posture, you're just going to get destroyed. They're going to get a free hit on you like that. There you go. So we just got smacked in the face. It also adjusts all the damage values. So you'll see here, thrust weapons are really strong actually in RBM, as they should be, especially if you don't have the proper armor. And then your blunt weapons are pretty good at doing crush through damage. But essentially, you can one-tap pretty much anybody if they don't have good armor and you have any kind of weapon. Whereas if you have a crappy weapon or no skill, you're going to get destroyed. Let's take this guy out. Yeah, so in RBM, you have to have good armor if you want to survive. It's really important. The other thing is the stats of your gear are not nearly as important as your skills. So your skills will determine a lot more of how much damage you do, how much posture you have, how much posture is used when you hit somebody, and how much posture is taken from you when you block their attacks. So if you're struggling with RBM, you've tried it before and it's really frustrating, it's probably because you had low athletic skill. So if you have a higher athletic skill, it will increase your posture and make it so that you can actually do stuff in combat. Otherwise, it feels like you can attack maybe twice and then your guy's gassed out. You can see here with this character, I've got him pretty well leveled up, so he can just steamroll people. but he's not invulnerable like the base game. If we get hit in the head, we don't have armor there, we're just going to get one tapped. So RBM main goal is to slow the pace of the game down and make it a little bit more in line with what realistic combat would have been. So then when it comes to configuring RBM, it actually has its own category here, or its own button on the main menu. So RBM configuration, you can see here we've got everything on default just about, except for the troop overhaul, because I had a separate mod that was doing that for me, so I turned that one off. But if you don't have any other mods active, you can turn it on and it'll actually adjust all of the troops so that they can take advantage of the RBM changing of stats and everything. So you could change a lot of things in here. One thing I didn't show was the reload speed for ranged weapons. It's really, really slow in RBM, so it can be kind of tedious and annoying. You might want to turn it to vanilla if you don't want to deal with that. But the downside is ranged weapons are really OP, and it's even more so in RBM because one of the side effects is that they make the shield accurate to its physical, representation. So there's no more force field where shields will block for, half a foot outside of the range of the shield, the actual what the shield looks like in the game. Whereas in this one, it'll just go right through it. So really good about that, but it also makes ranged weapons even stronger. Passive shoulder shields. So you can get two different types of shields. There's ones that are actively held on your hand and ones that will actually go on your shoulder, and they actively block. So if you're getting shot at and you have a shoulder shield, you just turn your character to that shoulder and then you'll block a lot of them without having to use the whole hand to take up that slot. A lot of this stuff not really that important. Now, if the module status, this is for the AI. So the AI for RBM makes it so that soldiers are a little bit more hesitant to engage. They don't just go straight in and start crashing into each other. The base game has gotten a little bit more like RBM over time, so this is not as drastic, but it's still a huge improvement, I would say, compared to the base game. Like I said, the base game, they tried to slow down the pace of combat a little bit, but it's still way better to have the RBM AI active. That posture system where you get stunned if you run out of posture or the enemy gets stunned, you can turn that off here if you don't want it. So you can do that right here with the posture system. You could have different multipliers. And then there's obviously some other things like the AI, if you want them to act differently. And then obviously the tournament. So in the base game tournaments, you show up to a tournament and whoever's there is who you fight. In RBM, they make it so that you match more equivalently with somebody. So if you're a low tier, you're going to match with peasants. If you're a high tier, you're going to match with mostly noble troops. So it's a lot more fair. But this is how I have mine set up. Then that's just for this last campaign. But you can adjust it however you want. If you like RBM, but you hate the posture system, which is, I would say, the most common complaint, just turn it off right here. It's not that big of a deal. So that is RBM. Up next, we've got vanilla AI sieges for RBM. So I'm going to scroll down here. This is a short one. It's kind of hard to show you an example of this because the AI is difficult to really notice the difference, but you can tell if you've got a ton of experience in the game, it does actually make a bit of a difference. So RBM changes the way the AI works, and this mod turns that off specifically for sieges. So it reverts the AI behavior for sieges back to vanilla, and that's because Tailwards recently made some changes, made their pathfinding better. It made the realistic siege tactics a bit more useful. And so this basically just reverts it back to that so that you don't have to deal with some of the shortcomings of the RBM feature during sieges. All right, next is the Smart RBM Patch. Now, this one is a small one, but essentially it adjusts all of the values for the armor. And the main goal here, you can see here, it says consistency ensures all armors in your game, including modded ones, have realistic and balanced stats. So one thing that I see a decent amount of complaints with RBM is that armor is a bit too effective. So this mod is trying to bring that a little bit more in line so that it's realistic, but also balanced. Give it a try. I did notice a little bit of a difference. I didn't notice a huge difference though, but it is enough. In some situations, you can definitely tell it's not quite the same as the base RBM. And I do prefer it with this mod. That's why we're going to keep it in the mod list. Another small mod that made it to the list is Troops Prefer Spears. This is very self-explanatory. There is a slider in there where you can adjust how much they prefer to use spears. I just left it on default. It works great. When you're playing with RBM, you definitely want this because you want your troops to use spears. RBM makes spears much more useful, and this makes it so that your troops essentially are more useful. Up next, we have better pikes for RBM. Now, this mod is specifically meant to be used with RBM, and it changes the length. I believe by default, RBM maxes out around 400 reach, but for this mod, it extends it beyond 400. You can see this one, and this is a cheap one, 340. It has a weapon reach of 527, so definitely more pike-like. It also changes some of the AI behaviors with that. So just be aware, they will act a little bit more smart when they're trying to use a pike. Like they'll actually counter cavalry. They'll put their pikes down sooner. They'll travel in formations where they can actually get their spears out or their pikes out. The next two mods are Immersive Battlefields and More Battle Shouts. So you notice here, when we select our troops, there's a shout back. There's some horns that go off when we give the charge command. And then they have a sergeant within their ranks that relays the shouts that we're giving. So we'll say the command and then they will say it again to relay it to their troops. There's also more shouts when they actually get into combat. Let's get them in there. It just basically, these two mods combined especially, they add a lot of immersion, making the battlefield feel a little bit more alive as opposed to the base game where you kind of just have like 2 or 3 things that happen where weapons clank, people shout, and that's about it. There's no real rhyme or reason to it. This one adds a little bit more to it. It's not going to make a huge difference. It's not going to feel like a Hollywood movie, but it does add another layer to it. Let's give them a full command to attack. And then, like I said, it's not a huge difference, but you'll notice little subtle differences, especially if you've been playing for a while. It makes it feel a little bit more alive. So that is Immersive Battlefield and More Battle Shouts. The next mod is called Realistic Battle Adjustments. Now, this one is going to be kind of difficult to show because some of these are quite subtle, but essentially what it does is it makes combat feel a little bit more realistic, kind of like what RBM was trying to do, but more on the animations and attack speed side. So you notice when I attack, it goes pretty fast, and when the enemy attacks, it's not the same slow windup that you're used to seeing in the base game. So I know when I first started playing with this mod, I was missing if you've seen my videos, you know I'm usually pretty competent with combat. I almost had to relearn how to play the whole game again just from this one campaign because the stabs especially are incredibly fast. Like, look at like that one, I knew that was coming. I still couldn't even block it in time. It's really, really fast. So like in real life, if you try to stab somebody with a spear, there's not going to be this massive wind up and then a slow thrust. It's a really, really fast thrust. The same thing with some of the other attacks, like the attacks from the side. Let me read off a couple of other things. So it tweaks the running speed, collision between friendly troops, more animations. Heavy attacks will be stronger and normal attacks will cause a longer stun effect. When shields are hit, causes shields to spin more visibly, so it pushes them aside more. It just tries to make combat a little bit more realistic instead of the Hollywood style, you know, have a really big wind up and backswing. It's not nearly as bad in this game as, say, something like Elden Ring, where that's super exaggerated. But still, this is a very fun mod that I recommend using if you're looking for a more challenging melee combat system. And that is, again, realistic combat adjustments. Next, let's talk about better smithing. This is one of my favorite quality of life mods, especially if you plan on doing any kind of smithing, any at all. This is a lifesaver. So there's a lot of functions here, but the main ones that I like to use it for, if we come down here to, if you've got a ton of materials that you need to refine, normally you'd have to do it one by one, but with this mod, you can do bulk. So you see here, if I hold control, it kicks it up by 5. If I hold shift, it does 50. And if I do control shift, it does as many as you can get away with your current stamina and supplies. So you could literally do an entire stack back to back. You can also do the same thing with forging. So you can forge multiple, so 5, 50, or as many as you can get. It also makes it so you can save designs. So if you make a beautiful weapon, you can save it and then recall it as many times as you want. So no more having to go through this list here, and hopefully you hadn't crafted it off of the map or off of this list. You could just save as many designs as you want, pull them back, and then craft it, and you can spam craft them as well. Same thing with smelting. So like I can smelt this whole stack here. Let's actually do that real quick. So smelt all of it. I'm going to smelt those down, and you can see just instantly everything's converted. Really, really nice quality of life mod. You can also adjust this. If you come here to the mod settings, a lot of things are adjustable. So you can see here, I have mine set to 5, 50, and then obviously the infinite one where it does the whole stack. There's other options in here. You can change the recovery rate while you're inside of town, recovery rate while you're outside of town. So you can actually set it so that you recover even while you're traveling on the campaign map. I know that's something that a lot of people complained about. Well, this mod fixes that. You can also do unlimited crafting stamina. There's a lot of stuff that you can add here. So it's just a really nice quality of life to mod to use if you're doing anything smithing related. Oh, the other thing, it uses prefixes. So you can see here, legendary, masterwork, balanced, dull, and rusty. So instead of getting like a stack of 50 different weapons, it'll put them nice and neat into whatever they qualify as. So if it's a legendary, whatever you named it as, it'll be stacked in these categories. So it just keeps your inventory nice and compact. So that is better smithing continued. The next mod we're going to talk about is called Bandit Black Hole. So you notice how there's 3 or 4 different bandit groups around here. If I want to fight them all at once, all I need to do is catch one of them, and then there's an option here with those numbers. Do you really think you can beat us? Bring everyone around. So it's going to pull everybody from the area, and now you can see it even pulled ones that we didn't even see. So there's 5 different groups here: looters, and then also one group of deserters. I believe there's an option in the mod that doesn't allow them to pull in deserters. I have it on because I want to have tough battles. So in the late game, instead of having to chase individual groups, it'll pull a certain radius, and you can also adjust the radius with which it pulls these troops in. So we'll go take a look at that right now. So here in the mod options, you've got radius. I have it set to 30. I think it says by default between 1 and 30 is recommended. If you do 50, it's a very large area, roughly distance between cities. So you'll literally clean up the whole thing. You could set it as high as you want and clear the whole map in one go, I guess. I don't know. That doesn't seem very balanced, but you could do it. And then here's an option to turn off deserters because they're pretty strong. If you just want to clear the looters and mountain bandits, forest bandits, etc., then you could turn this off and it won't include those. But I have it on just to add a little difficulty. But that is a very nice quality of life mod, Bandit Black Hole. Up next is a small mod called Simple Naval Mod. Now this changes 2 key elements of the game. It increases the Shipmaster XP that you gain, and you'll see here that our Shipmaster skill is actually not too far ahead of Bosun and not too far behind Mariner. Typically, Mariner will be the first one to cap out at max level, and then Shipmaster will be like maybe 10 or 20% of this level, so it's usually really far behind. I think they increased it by 3 or 4x with this mod, which is probably where it needs to be. It might even need to be increased a little bit more than that, but still much better with that, because in the base game you're just not going to level Shipmaster no matter how many points you put into that skill. So very important with that. But I also like the fact that they increase the sailing speed. Well, actually it does I think I said 2. It actually does 3 things. So it increases sailing speed. It also makes the AI more likely to go on the water, so that more battles and more sea lanes are open, and it just makes the naval combat and the naval part of the game a bit more populated. So very cool mod, not a big one, but like I said, it does make some pretty important changes. Next, let's talk about a fun little mod called Arenas Extended. Doesn't really change too much, it just changes the maps that are used for the arenas. This is a Landian arena, so it's basically just like a jousting ring that you can go in and fight on foot in. They do have a little bit of mounted combat in here. Obviously, we're doing the practice round right here, but very different. Let's go to the next town. Here's the Britannia one. I know we did some clips earlier from this one. Not too big. But here's one of the Empire ones, and this is actually quite different. So the arena will also depend on the level of the settlement. So the higher level settlements, you will actually get a different scene here. In the other ones, the higher tier ones, it's not wood, it's all stone, and it's, I think, maybe a little bit bigger, or maybe it's the same setup, but it definitely looks a lot nicer than this. But that's Arenas Extended. I'm not going to cover every single one, but it does add a little bit of flavor. Now the next mod is basically centered around sieges. It's called Epic Sieges, and it changes a couple different things that we're going to take a look at here. So before we go into the siege, it does increase the amount of hit points in the battle. I don't know if it actually changes it out here on the campaign map, but in the combat, in the actual siege, it can take a few more hits. All of your siege towers, and then of course your rams can take a few more hits. The enemy gate also has more HP, so it takes longer to take the gates down. So that means you're going to be exposed to fire for quite a bit longer. It basically makes the sieges last longer, so it favors the defense, which is kind of nice because recent changes with some of the patch, it actually made sieges much easier for the offense. But let's go into the battle, and then I'll show you one more very, very important change. Now, one of the big changes is you can now push ladders no matter where somebody is on the ladder. So like right now we're about halfway up. They would not be able to push this off normally in the base game, but you can see right here they could push you all the way from the top, so you'll take a lot of damage. See, it almost killed us, and we were very close to the top. If we were all the way on the top, it would still push you off. So ladders are no longer the guaranteed win. You have to keep units up there, and you have to beat them off from pushing that. So you need either somebody to sit here and attack anybody that's pushing the ladder, or you need to get a small enough force up there to block them from being able to push the ladder in the first place. So it makes sieges, like I said, a little bit slower, harder for the offense, and a little bit easier for the defense. Now, granted, this only works when you're fighting in person, so obviously it's not going to help the AI versus AI battles. Those are all auto-resolve, but for battles that you're fighting in, it's going to make them a lot more interesting, in my opinion. But that is Epic Sieges. The next mod is called Unlimited NC Mercenary Clans, and you can see he ran it down here. It's a very simple mod. It removes the cap maximum of 3 mercenary clans for your kingdom that you can hire. So you can now hire as many of these mercenary clans as you want if you can get a hold of their leaders, or if you've got diplomacy mod, you can just send them messages and then hire them remotely. So the AI is able to do this. And with this mod, now you're able to do the same thing. It'll tie into some other mods that I have active next, which we're going to talk about right now. Now we'll cover the next 2 mods together, starting with Mercenary Warfares for war sales. This is a very simple mod. Again, it adds 5 generic Nord minor faction clans. So by default, there are no Nord minor factions, no mercenary clans that are of Nordic origin. This adds 5 new ones. And the other mod is Mercenary Warfare 30 more minor factions. Does just like it says. So the other one adds 5, this one adds 30 more, so you have 35 more mercenaries running around the map. So when you go to war with somebody, there is a real chance that even if they're weak, they could hire a ton of mercenary clans to help out, and then you'll have a pretty tough war. Because in my campaign, I didn't really want to just steamroll everybody. I wanted to have a chance where the AI can hire a bunch of mercenaries, and then we would have real trouble. I also have RBM active with some troop changes, and it made all the mercenary troops a little bit stronger. So these guys were not only more plentiful, but the troops that they were using were quite a bit stronger. So that's what this was about, but it's a pretty fun mod. And then when you pair it with the previous one we just talked about, where you can hire as many clans as you want, you could do the same thing. If you save up some money and you form your own kingdom, you could just hire out all these mercenary contracts to all these little clans and then just storm people with, 20 or 30 mercenaries on your side. So that is 2 more mods, Mercenary Warfare and Mercenary Warfare for war sales. The next mod is called Art of War. Now this has to do specifically with the AI on the campaign map. So have you ever had a campaign where you see the AI take a piece of land and within half a day it's already taken back by the enemy? This happens all the time. I complain about it all the time in my campaigns and in my review videos. And this mod basically seeks to rectify that. So the first stat, garrison hours. So when a fief is taken by the AI, this requires a certain amount of hours for a number of the army to stay and defend that captured settlement. In this case, it's 120 hours. So we're talking, 24 hours in a day? That's like a little more than 5 days. So for 5 days after a settlement's taken, they will sit there and defend it with at least a few armies. You can set, I believe, army member troops. Yeah, so you can set how many people sit back and help. But there's also some other options for sally out to help the garrison parties. Sally out range, so if you want them to have more range. Caution, so if you prefer to stay inside and don't take a chance coming out, you can adjust that. The army member troops, so how many people actually can help. And then there's a bunch of other stats here, but the patrol ranges, so the armies that are sitting in the fief, you can have them go out and help patrol if you want, or you can have them just sit in the settlement. So there's a lot of options here that help stabilize recent conquest. Like I said, I complain about this all the time. And ever since I downloaded this mod, I can't really think of any instances where a settlement was taken and then immediately lost back. For the most part, when something's taken, it's held onto. Now, one thing that will happen here is this will suck in quite a few troops from that one army. So let's say if Battania goes out and takes something, if they have to garrison with half their army, that means they don't have those troops to help defend or go take other settlements. So they will be susceptible to counterattack from somebody else. So if you see something getting taken and you have Art of War active, it could be an option for you to go out and take land from them, because that means their armies are tied up defending that recent conquest. So there are still some things that you can tweak in here to try to maybe avoid some of that, but I wouldn't worry about it too much. I would much rather have Art of War active than not have it active, because it does make the game more enjoyable when the fiefs are taken and they're actually fought over and held. So anyways, that's Art of War. The next mod we're going to talk about is Diplomacy. Now, this is a mod I've covered before, but I didn't really cover it in too much detail, so I'll try to go into a little bit more this time. It changes quite a few things. So you can send messengers to anybody on the map with this mod. That's one reason I use it all the time. So if there's somebody across the map you want to talk to, you don't have to physically be there. You can just send them a message. So for example, I can do it right here, send messenger for 250 gold. The main reason you use this though is to make wars and diplomacy much more interesting. So right now, when you go to war with somebody, you have this war exhaustion meter. Now, war exhaustion increases as you lose units, as you lose nobles, as you lose fiefs, as you get raided, and as you lose battles, essentially. So you basically want to inflict as much damage on the enemy while minimizing the amount of damage that you take so that war exhaustion doesn't go to 100. Now, when war exhaustion goes to 100, the other side gets to enforce their demands. So for example, even though we're smaller, we could technically out-compete these guys by just raiding the crap out of everything that they own and then driving up their war exhaustion, maybe winning a few battles, keeping them prisoner, things like that. And then we could technically ask for some things in the peace deal. So we could ask for money. I believe you can ask for settlements too. I'm pretty sure I ended up doing that in my run. I haven't really played with this as much, but pretty sure you can do that. But it's very common to get money. But yeah, the war exhaustion will force a peace deal. So no more having wars last for like 20 years and the AI just doesn't want to get out of it. So that's a thing. It also changes your influence. So influence is much harder to come by with this because things cost a lot more. So your peace deal is costing 500. So this is, if you want to do it and bypass your nobles, you could just do it directly, or you can ask everybody if they want to do it. And it's a little cheaper, but then you have to win support from all of your allies and stuff. Also, they put a cap on your influence. So as you get up past, I believe it's like around 1,000, there we go. You can see with 1,500 influence, we have a decay of high influence -10. So you can't just sit on a ton of influence because they add a rubber band effect. So as you go, I believe it's past 1,000, somewhere around there, it will start to stack up a decay. And the higher above that number you get, the higher that number gets. So if we had, say, like plus 40 influence and we were to get up to maybe like 5,000 influence, this decay would probably go up to like -100. So you're never going to be able to save up infinite influence like you did in the base game. It basically tries to make it so your influence isn't just like an infinite pool where you can bully people around. You do have to use it or you will lose it. So that's another part of it. And then finally, if you go over here to diplomacy, there's other options. So you can form non-aggression pacts with people, alliances. You can do obviously the usual declaring war, and then trade agreements, which I believe that is actually from the base game, but they integrate it with the mod as well now. And then anytime you sign a peace deal with somebody, there is a minimum time where you have a truce and you cannot declare war on them. So you can't just like take a piece of land, sue for peace, they disband their army, and then you immediately attack them again. So there is a little bit of a grace period there. So pretty cool. It changes the game quite a bit. It's definitely not as if TerraWorlds had developed it themselves and integrated it properly in the game. They probably could have done a bit more with it, but you know, they're working with the constraints, that the spaghetti code and all the stuff that they have in the base game. And it does a pretty good job, but it's not going to be, say, like a Paradox Games diplomacy. But with that said, I do prefer it with diplomacy mod most of the time, although sometimes dealing with war exhaustion can be kind of frustrating because you're having a good war and then you get them up to 100% and you don't want the war to end, but it forces you to do a peace deal anyways, even though you don't want it and you're winning. You shouldn't be forced to sign a peace deal, in my opinion. That's about the only downside that I can see. Like if you're trying to go for a world conquest, you definitely don't want diplomacy mod because you will get kicked out of your wars quite a bit when you're steamrolling people. But anyways, that's diplomacy mod. Hopefully that makes sense. Up next, let's talk about Equip Best Item Reloaded. This is specifically for war sales, and that's because you have a stealth outfit now. In the base game, you only have these two outfits, and the Equip Best Item worked for both of those. Now it also takes into consideration your stealth bonus, so this mod has been tweaked for war sales. But essentially what this mod does is anytime you have equipment, either armor, horse equipment, or anything in your weapon slots, anything that's better than what you currently have, you just need to push a button and it'll automatically assign the better gear to your character. So for example, if we undress our buddy here and then we go ahead and hit that, it's going to reassign that stuff because that was the best armor that we had in our inventory. But you can see for having one or two characters, it's probably not that big of a deal. But you can see here we've got a pretty healthy list of 110 companions. It's really tedious to manage all that. So ideally you'd want to have a mod like this to manage this amount of equipment. There's quite a few options you can use here. So you'll notice we've got a lock symbol on here. I want to keep this specific polearm, even if it's not the best one that we could possibly get. I want to keep our inventory standard across all of our fighters for specific items. And so that's why I have this locked. Same thing with the mace. I locked these in. I also have some units down here that are mounted. You could see they have access to horses. And then when we go to other people that are going to be on foot, I do not want them to have mounts. So I can lock that mount slot to make sure anytime I do this, they won't get one. Now, if I choose this, if I push this back to default, you can see they're going to get stuck with a horse now. So obviously I didn't want that, so we can lock it. So that's how that works. Pretty easy. And then there's some other stats here that you can adjust. So if you want to change the filter, you can make sure that it has specific stats that you want rather than whatever the default is from the base game. This is particularly useful for RBM because I feel like equip best item doesn't always understand RBM that well, and you might want to go for a specific weapon stat and then RBM's trying to optimize for a different one. So you can at least go in there and tweak the settings that you're looking for. So just be aware you do have more options than just the automatic. You can also have them equip the best item, including whatever's in the inventory here of the town. So if you want to try and find the best item that money can buy, you just unlock this and then we can see what it comes up with. So we've got slightly better gear. Didn't really change too much. Although, holy smokes, that's expensive. Oh, because it did it for all of our companions. Well, that makes a lot of sense. So yeah, we would have to pay quite a bit of money to do that. But yeah, so that's one way you can do it. So like I said, you just unlock this and then equip bus item. This works for only the character on the screen, and then this button does every single person in your party. So that is equip best item. This is a must-have if you're going to do a companion campaign. I do not recommend playing without this mod for a companion-only campaign. It's still, even though it's still useful even for a regular campaign, because it is kind of tedious thumbing through all that inventory, but that's that mod. All right, now we're going to go on to one of my favorite mods for this specific campaign, or actually ever since TierWorld's changed this. It's called Party AI Controls. If you hold Control and press P, it's going to take a second. It'll load you into your Party AI control screen. Now, the reason this is one of my favorite mods is because you can turn off, make donations to garrisons, may take troops from settlement, may besiege. You can basically turn off all the annoying stuff that you don't want your parties to do. So I do not want them donating half their troops to a garrison, especially if we're trying to fight for settlements that we're not taking. If it's something that we're going to keep, we can just pull those back out of the garrison and then put it back in the party. Although I'd rather them not do it in the first place because it's a bunch of extra clicks for me to have to do. So it's just better to turn this off from the beginning. Also, if you want to keep your parties to joining only your army, you can turn this off, and that will disallow the AI from calling them into those armies. So this is really nice if you don't want to have to make sure that you're on top of that all the time and calling them in right before war starts, because the AI will snap your guys up and then you won't have access to them. Same thing with a lot of these other ones, and then may take prisoners, may recruit troops, all this stuff you can turn off. It's also pretty nice if you're trying to have a specific unit type in your clan armies. So for example, you can see right here, I have 20% allowance for melee troops and 80% allowance for foot archers. The reason I was doing this is because the specific strategy I was going for was a archer heavy build, and in the base game you cannot do this. So whatever the AI wants to put in their party is what you have to deal with. You only have access to controlling what's in your main party, and then if you want to control what the AI has, you have to do it manually. And then even then, anytime you touch a settlement, they will start swapping troops out and doing stuff that you really don't want them to do. So you can come in here and adjust all these settings. So if you want to do an archer only, you could do this guy have archer only. Maybe this guy, you want him to have only cav because he's specialized and has a bunch of perks for that. This guy can specialize in foot troops. Whatever you want to do, you can do. You could also set up specific templates, and I'm not going to go through this right now because it's going to pull up every single unit in the game, and I have a mod that adds a ton, so it's going to take a long time to load. But you can have specific templates. Let's say, for example, if you want to have only shock troops, only Battanian shock troops, and only Fiend champions. You can come in here, select those 2 units, and the only 2 units that these parties are allowed to hire are going to be those. You can set the upgrade path, tree path for these as well, so pretty nice. Another thing that I really like about this, you can give orders. So you can have your parties patrol an area, escort a party. Like let's say you have a caravan that's going to be going into war zone. You can have one of your strong parties escort them, and then they'll have a much better chance of surviving. Although that can get you in trouble because if your party gets caught and your caravan gets caught, you lost both an army and a caravan instead of just losing a caravan. So be careful with that, but that can be helpful. Stay in a settlement. That one's really nice for wartime if you don't want your guys to go out and get killed because the AI makes poor choices. So just have them stay in a settlement sometimes is the best option. Visit a settlement, besiege, defend, and recruit. So all kinds of good stuff here. And then you can have them do multiple things. So I can have them specifically go to Morihig. So defend Dunglanis, then visit Morihig, and then I want you to go recruit. So you can do those things in that order. And then you can increase priority, decrease priority, however you want to do it. Now, one thing that I like to do with this mod is before you get to the point where you can form an army. Let's say you're clan tier 1 and you haven't joined a kingdom yet, right? You can actually start a party and have them follow you. So like we can have this guy follow John Hawkwood party, which is our main party. So there we go. Now we can start that party, give them troops or have them recruit troops, and then we can give them the order to follow us. Now we don't get the leadership XP because we don't form an army, but they will actually be near us. So if we want to go out and fight stronger armies, we can do that from earlier. We don't have to wait until we form an army. We can do it because we have the party AI control mod. Really, really flexible mod. There's a bunch of other options. That's actually the same one, but there is another screen mod options. Here we go. So there's a bunch more options that you can do in here. Leader roster, party limits. You can set all kinds of stuff. This is such a good mod. I didn't even scratch the surface with what you can do here, but like I said, just literally just this one feature alone right here, donate troops to the garrison, 100% you need to download this mod if you're going to do any kind of campaign where you touch a settlement when you have your clan parties with you. It's the most annoying thing in the world when they donate half their army and you can't get them back because it's somebody else's fief. So super annoying. Make sure you get this mod, use it, fiddle with all these things if you want, but definitely get it for at least for this function right here. But if not, you could also, like I said, have all these other fun functions. So that is party AI controls. All right, the next mod we're going to talk about is Battle Size Resized. Now this mod has been updated for the most recent patch, and the only thing this does is it increases the max amount of troops you can have in the battlefield. By default on PC, you can get up to 500 versus 500 or 1,000 units on the map. In this case, that'll go up to 1,000 on each side, so 2,000 total. And it still does the same thing where it takes whatever percentage of the troops that you have versus the percentage troops that they have. So let's say if you have 2,000 troops and they have 3,000 troops, you're probably going to be bringing in around 600, 700, and they're going to be bringing in about 12, 1,300. So it'll still be 2,000 total, but because they have more troops, you get percentage-wise less than what they brought in. So let's go ahead and see what the unit cap is on this one. Here we go. That is a lot of troops. Needless to say, you do need a very good PC to be able to handle this, because this mod, especially when all the action's happening, it can really make your PC chug. But there's, you can see 933 plus 51. So we have 1,006. The enemy has 1,007. So it even goes above 1,000, apparently. I don't know. I think it's like 1,024 is the max by the game engine. But you can see essentially this is going to be a massive, massive battle. Now, keep in mind, if you're using RBM, the battles are also going to be longer. So if you have 2,000 people on the battlefield and it's a longer battle, it does increase the duration of some of these battles. I have time to spare to do this. If you're looking for a quick campaign, do not use this mod. It's going to slow your battles by quite a bit. But if you want something that's super epic, you know, the 2,000 versus 2,000, this is the one to go. Well, I probably should have chosen different units than archers to show this off. They just slaughtered our cav. Let's see if these guys will get up here and show us some fun combat footage, but maybe not. Okay, it's going to be archer versus archer. I decided to add 1,000 archers to both sides for some stupid reason, but still pretty cool. You can see all the arrows coming down. But yeah, you can see this is going to be a very epic fight. It's going to take a while. I also forgot to mention, this also includes sieges. So this is not just for field battles. You can have 2,000 units in a siege battle. It makes it so much more fun, in my opinion. The sieges are way more epic. The choke points are a lot more brutal because you have more units for the same number of ways to get into the castle, the settlements. So you still only have one ram and 2 siege towers, but it's a lot of fun. So anyways, yeah, I think this is going to be pretty boring to watch. So let's cut it. That is Battle Size Resized. Next, let's talk about Bannerlord XP Tweaks. I don't typically use this mod unless I'm doing a companion campaign, and the reason is I feel like the base game is reasonably balanced, but if you're looking for a faster campaign or if you want to do some tweaks here, let's go over what each setting is and then you can make the determination if it makes sense for you or not. So additional XP from any deal. So in the base game, the only way you make trade XP is by selling something for a profit that you specifically bought. This actually turns it on so that you get money no matter what the transaction is. So if you sell a high volume of items or you buy a high volume of items, you make the XP on the volume, not so much on the profit that you got. I have mine set to 40%. That's probably too high. I was able to max out my trade skill pretty fast. So I would probably drop this down if you want it to just be kind of like a passive set of trade XP, maybe like 10% or something. But yeah, you do get quite quite a bit. So like after a battle, you get a ton of loot to sell. And then this basically gives you a ton of XP. So in the base game, if you're not using any of these other mods to increase your loot, this is probably going to be sufficient. But it's just nice to have a little extra. Now, minimum learning rate, I have another mod that I already talked about. For some reason, this one doesn't work in the current patch. Career experience is the one I used to offset this. So this minimum learning rate does not currently work. At least last time I tested it, it didn't. So use the learning rate one. Apply only before level 330. So if you want to go above 330, you can do that. You can actually increase your skill cap to 1,024. So if you've ever wanted to see what a 1,000 athletic skill looks like, it's pretty funny. Try it out, see what happens. You move incredibly fast. Down here for the XP multipliers, you've got one for just the player, just your clan XP, and then for everybody else on the map. So if you want to do it, like if you could see here, I did mostly just the clan. So anybody that's in my companion, all of my companions got a 15 times boost. And this is not really a good number to use if you're trying to boost up other skills like Steward or medicine. It goes too fast. But 15x is actually really good for combat skills because companions are really, really incredibly slow at leveling up melee skills. So that's why I do this, because I don't want them to take 50 or 60 years just to get up to like level 200. I'd rather them do it in like maybe 5 or 10 years. And this number is basically what gets them there. So, and this is without using any attribute points or focus points. So as I mentioned before, I just leave everything blank. I leave these multipliers on, and then they're able to get leveled up pretty fast without me having to micromanage it all. So that's how that works. If you want to increase your player XP, obviously you can do that there. And then you can adjust some stuff for the alleyways. I wasn't able to get this to work because it was crashing. So one of the mods, I don't know which mod it is, but it does cause a crash with alleyways. So don't mess with them with this mod list. Character development, so levels per attribute point. So if you want to get an attribute point, normally in the base game, it's 4 levels for every 1 attribute point. I have it moved up to 2. And then focus points per level 2 so that you can level up a little faster. I do this personally because I set my character to 0, 0, 0 all across the board. And then I make up for it by giving a little bit extra. So a much harder start and then a little bit easier late game is kind of what I was going for there. You can increase your renown multiplier if you want. And then smithing, this is where you can adjust your smithing speed. So I have mine set to unlock parts a little bit faster because on these fun campaigns, I don't want to be sitting there grinding for 24/7. So that is Banner XP Tweaks. There's a lot of really good stuff in here. I do recommend it because it's modular. You can use what you want and then don't use the other stuff. Just turn it off. So pretty good mod. Up next, let's look at Battle Stats mod. Now, I wasn't able to get this working on my John Hawkwood campaign. I'm curious to see if there is a limit to how many companions you can get stats for. You can see here, this is a screenshot from the mod page. I have used this in previous campaigns and it worked just fine, but in this specific one, I just tested it right now and it just was a blank page. But it tracks your kills, your personal record, your kill death ratio, your wounds, battles, how many battles they fought in. And it will rank you in terms of the most kills to the least. I don't know, maybe you can change it. But you can see here, it tracks all kinds of stuff. Cavalry kills, infantry, horse archers, this specific army totals. I really like it for the companions. When you're trying to do a companion campaign, you want people to see how well each one's doing. And I thought that was kind of interesting. But maybe 100 and, I don't know, what do we have? 118 companions. It might be a bit too much. Maybe it doesn't show everything because it's too many. But I know in my previous campaign, I think I had like 60 or 70 and it showed everything just fine. It was a little slow to load because it's a lot of data, but I do remember it working fine on the other one. So maybe don't go above 100 if you want this one to work, but it's a cool little mod and kind of interesting to look at the data. But that is Battle Stats. Up next, let's talk about Distinguished Service. This mod makes it so that any of your regular troops can promote into companions, and it can happen organically through combat. Now you can set a ton of different parameters here. Starting at the top, you can increase the cost. So if you want to promote somebody, you can set a cost all the way up to 25,000 dinars per promotion, or you can leave it free at 0. Tier threshold, this means that if it's set at -1, anybody can promote at any level, even a peasant at tier 0, or you can force them to go up to a certain tier before they're able to promote. I just leave mine on -1. Base additional skill points, so anytime somebody promotes, they get extra skill points to assign. I don't typically use this because I end up wiping mine clean with character reload. I showed you earlier some of the templates that I have. I prefer to do it that way. It's just easier if you're going to have a lot of companions. If you're doing like a normal campaign, these are probably nice to keep on and use. But if you're trying to do, 100 companions, this is going to be really tedious. I don't recommend it. So just some food for thought there. Next, we've got the 3 different categories. You have infantry, cavalry, and ranged kill threshold. This means how many kills that unit needs to get for this unit to be able to promote. Now, this is kills for a single battle, not cumulative kills over their lifetime. So if you want infantry to promote, they need to get 4 kills by themselves in one battle, and then they will have the potential to upgrade. Same thing, cav at 6 and ranged at 5. You can adjust these however you want. It goes all the way up to 25 and then all the way down to 1. So generally, cavalry need to be pretty high because they have a high survival rate. Ranged aren't usually in too much danger, so they get a lot of kills. Infantry is probably the hardest one to do, so this one should probably be even lower than that, but you can adjust it however you want. And then performance, outperform percentile. This is if everybody in the party is getting 4 kills, then that one guy may not actually promote because he needs to perform better than the average by a certain amount, depending on what you set it at. So this one's kind of annoying. I would rather than just do the flat kill. So if that's the case, you can just set it either all the way to one side so that you don't have to deal with outperformance. And then max nominations. Every battle, you can promote up to 3 different companions. So I think it used to be 5. I don't know why that got patched down to 3, but you have 3 people that qualify based on all these other stats. You can get 3 to promote. And when somebody promotes, they actually keep all of their gear as well. So if you have a cavalry that promotes, when he promotes, he keeps all of that gear, including the horse armor, the lance, all that stuff. So pretty cool there. And then the other stuff's pretty self-explanatory. You can also have a bunch of other stats here. You can have a whole list of names to have them pull from, so you don't have to go rename them manually. That would probably be useful for my companion campaigns, but it's all right. Not that big of a deal. And then you can allow the AI to do this as well. But that is Distinguished Service mod for War Sales. It is working. They have the old Distinguished Service. It does not work for War Sales. This one does. I have tested it in battle, and you can actually get it to work. Up next, we got longer Mercenary Contracts. Now, this is a very small mod, literally just does this one thing. It makes it so that Mercenary Contracts have a minimum service length. So you can set it all the way down to 15 days at a minimum and all the way up to just over a year. So 84 days is a full year. And this keeps the mercenaries from being able to bounce around from one faction to the next within days. They'll be locked into a contract for 84 days. I believe default is something like half a year, so like 42 days. I could be wrong on that. I don't know what the default is, but it's somewhere less than the 84 days. I bumped mine up to 84 because I have those other mods that increase the amount of mercenary clans by like 35. And so I didn't want these guys to bounce from one kingdom to the next. I wanted them to stick with the kingdom, push for a year, and then if they get fired, they get fired. No big deal. So that's why the main reason I had this mod. Now, I will give you a huge warning here. This mod will cause a crash to your game, but it is easily fixed. So the thing that causes the crash is if a kingdom dies and they have mercenaries under contract, and then when they die, the game's not able to detach them from their contract, and so it just causes a crash. So what you do is when you see a kingdom is close to dying, create some save files, make sure that you're saving frequently, and then when they lose their last settlement and that kingdom is gone, you want to reload the game with this turned off. Turn this off in your mod manager, let that kingdom die off, and then you can save the game, reload with this mod active, and then you can turn it back on. Or you could just leave it off and not use it. It's up to you. But I think if you're going to have a bunch of mercenaries on the map, I think this is the way to go, because there's some really funky things that happen. In my run, I had maybe 20 or 30 different mercenary clans swarming a neutral settlement, and they were just going back and forth, eating up all the food in that area. And they were literally just doing nothing. So with this mod active, they were actually participating in battles and helping kingdoms out and all that. So I think if you're going to go with a lot of mercenaries, this is a must-have mod. If you don't use this mod, I would probably not increase the amount of mercenary clans. So yeah, either have this one, all 3 of them, or have none of them. So that is longer mercenary contracts. All right, the next mod we're going to look at is called Volley. Now we've got an obscene amount of archers here. 1800. We don't need that many in real life, but I'm going to go ahead and turn on Volley. So if you press the letter J on your keyboard, Volley enabled for ranged. That means these guys will not shoot by themselves. They will actually shoot in volleys. So let's see if we can get these guys to let a nasty little barrage off. Hopefully it doesn't crash the game. There they go. One giant volley. Now, if I turn it off, everybody will be able to fire at will. But right now, because they're on volley fire, they have to shoot together. Or in theory, that's what they should be doing. Yeah, maybe with this, there they go. So you can see they kind of fire in a big volley. Obviously, this is an extreme amount of units, but it is kind of cool to see that big of a volley go off. Look at that. Oh, man. And the arrow flight time in this, because RBM is kind of a long time, so it took a while for the package to get there, but yeah, these guys are going to get smashed. Let's get one more good volley off. That was a fairly flat trajectory, but we should see some kills here. Yeah, I think maybe this is a bit too many people. I'm going to turn it off, and then we can see the difference. Okay, never mind. Anyways, that's volley fire. Pretty fun to use when you have like a normal amount of troops. Next, let's talk about Enlisted. So this is, if you've heard of another mod called Serve as a Soldier, this is very similar to that. I actually don't know if there are too many differences between the two, because from what I read, it's basically the same thing. I didn't play with Serve as a Soldier too much, but I did play quite a few hours with this Enlisted mod. So you talk to any army on the map. It could even be a mercenary, and you can join them. You go through the dialogue, and it says, I seek to join you in bearing arms in your service. And there you go. So now we join, and you do have some options here. You're not supposed to be able to take your current gear with you. So like if you have some really high tier weapons, they don't want you using those. You need to loot and get your own stuff or buy it from your commissar or whatever they call it. So your current gear needs to either be stashed or sold or whatever else. I usually just say you can have it all. So liquidate it, and then you become part of that army. Now you are locked into a contract here. I don't know the exact amount. I think it's about a year. There are penalties if you leave early. And then when you do leave, I don't believe you get to keep your rank. So you generally want to just stay in until you're done with it. And then you can back out and take your whatever rewards you get. Now we're going to get a bunch of pop-ups like this as you go. Kind of almost like a little mini game. So there's different things that you need to, here, we'll talk about this. So orders imminent, so we can do a bunch of these options here. We could listen to war stories, and you can see here you get soldier reputation, you get some charm XP, and then -1 fatigue. So as you do tasks, you will start to fatigue. So like for example, the sparring match, this is going to give you some XP. You have a pretty high chance to win. You get reputation, athletics, all that. But it also decreases your fatigue. So you need to do some of these other things that help basically make your fatigue less. So a lot of these things you can maintain your gear. I think that gives you some crafting XP, etc. So pretty cool. I like how they added all this stuff. This does get a little tedious if you're doing it. Like I think in my run, I did this for about 3 years in game, and I was getting kind of tired of clicking all this stuff after a while. It's kind of the similar things. But one thing that is kind of nice is you will move up in your, so if you come over here, you can look at your service records, your current position. You can see right here I'm ranked tier 1. I think I was up to tier 6. I was one less than the highest tier that you can go, and you get paid every muster. So in this case we're getting 24 per muster, and muster happens every, I want to say 10 or 11 days, something like that. Yeah, next payday is in 10.9 days. So 11 days. Every 11 days you get paid. You also get food while you're doing this, so they'll feed you and clothing, all that stuff. You can buy gear, or if you rank up, you get access to better gear. So there's a whole system here involved to help ease you into the game from the early game, because the early game sometimes it's just kind of a pain in the butt to go out there and not really know what you're doing if you're kind of new. So this can be a good segue to that. It'll kind of hold your hand and get you acclimated with some of the combat aspects of the game. One thing you do have to be careful of though, the AI is terrible. If you join an army, they'll just run you into the enemy and you'll get captured, and you have to do that. I think I lost 4 or 5 battles in my 3 years, which is pretty small amount. I would have expected to lose more than that, but yeah, the AI is terrible. So just be aware. It's going to be a little frustrating when that happens, but when it works out well, it's really fun, because you can take a lot of these fights early on where either you're fighting pirates or you're fighting, you know, rebel factions, bandits, whatever. It can be a lot of fun in the early game where you wouldn't normally be able to have access to that. You'd have to wait until you get to the middle game on your own. So pretty cool. But anyways, that is Enlisted. Oh, actually, before I forget, so when you get to the higher tier, you do get access to leading troops. It's not just yourself. And if you have companions, you can bring the companions with you, and they can participate in the fights. So it can be a good way to level up your companions if you want. I didn't go too heavy on the companions on the Enlisted stage, because you still have to pay for their wages. And you have to buy enough food for them to survive as well. They won't give you food for your companions. So I did run into an issue where they were starting to starve, so I just dropped them off at a town. So just be aware of that, but that is an option. And then as you get into the higher ranks, you will get access to troops. And then when you leave, you get to keep all the gear that you came in with if you get honorably discharged. So you have to just wait until you can qualify for an honorable discharge, which is, like I said, about a year or so. Anyways, that is Enlisted. Very fun mod to play at least once or twice with. I probably would not use this in every campaign, but once in a while I'll turn it on and use it, I would say. Now the next set of mods, there's I believe 2 or 3 of them here that we're going to talk about. The first one is Tier 7 Troop Unlocker for Harmony. This one is a support mod. This basically allows you to have Tier 7 troops, and if we click on some of these guys, you'll see here we have a Tier 7 Asteroid unit. So you will not be able to use the next mod if you do not have the Tier 7 Troop Unlocker. So the mod itself is called Warlords Battlefield War Sales Edition. And you can see here, these Aserai are not quite the same units as the base game. Obviously, the upgrade tree is quite a bit more extensive. The names are all changed, and they go all the way up to Tier 7 for some of the lines. This is the Noble line. So the Noble troops have much better stats, as you can see here. This Tier 0 recruit or Tier 0 Mameluke has 100 one-handed. If we were to go to a regular Tier 1 troop, let's see if we can find a regular Tier 1. So this is, yeah, the recruit. So he has 25 polearm and nothing else. So they split these up into 2 categories, but they have tiers that are still matching. So for example, a Tier 0 and the Mameluke is the other line. They will technically be the same tier, but they're going to perform completely differently. So these are supposed to represent like regular levies, peasants, levies, whatever. So just real not high quality troops. And you can see that their upgrade path is cut off at Tier 5. Whereas the Noble line, that one went all the way up to Tier 7 for some of the lines. And a lot of the other ones, they went up to Tier 6. So all the infantry, archers, horse archers, those go up to Tier 6. And then the shock cav go up to Tier 7. So pretty cool troop tree. Basically, this mod changes all the troop trees. I really like that, and that's just the Aserai. There's a huge amount of units that was added and changed in this game, in this mod. So I highly recommend using this one if you're looking for a different experience. And it worked quite well with RBM because it was balanced to that. With, if you see, there's a Warlords Warfare RBM patch included in that mod list. So if you're using RBM, make sure you download that patch for this. Let's look at some of these other units here. So the Rodok Noble, the Nobile, these guys go all the way up to Tier 7, and unfortunately this thing's gonna block me. So once you, I just got done covering Enlisted mod. If you have Enlisted and you're not actually using it by going in an army, its chat dialogue stays. So I just disable the mod halfway through the run when I'm no longer serving as a soldier, and then it won't block your view, but I'm too lazy to back out and do that at this point. But you can see these guys, 300 crossbow skill on the Tier 7. That is some very serious firepower that they've got here. So these guys are obviously geared towards ranged. Some are good on foot. So like the Nords have some really good Tier 7 infantry as well. A lot of the other factions have good cav. So this is a very good mod to have if you're looking for a completely different Bannerlord experience. Because like I said, these units are completely different from what the base game does. So I like the fact that they split into 2 different trees, and not just for the unit type. Like in the base game, your Noble line is either an archer or a cav and really nothing else. Whereas here, your Noble line can be 3 or 4 different routes. So that, I think, is a really, really nice change that they did. So anyways, that is Warlords Battlefield for War Sales Edition. And then don't forget the Warlords Warfare RBM patch. And then the final thing I want to talk about is a mod called Separatism. I don't have anything to show you for that because I do not want you to use this mod, but I want to make sure it's abundantly clear that this mod will cause crashes for you. I couldn't figure out what caused the crash, and it doesn't happen right away. In my testing, the crashes usually happen between years, I think it's 2 and 5. And once you get the crash, it bricks your save. You cannot get past it. I was not able to figure out what was causing the crash. I went back and tested after I figured out that the longer mercenary contract mod was causing some crashing, and that was actually a separate crash. So the Separatism crash is different. It's a really fun mod. It actually is really nice to have because it basically splits up all of these kingdoms. So every single fief is its own kingdom. And I thought that was a pretty cool concept, and I was going to try and run with it. Unfortunately, it just causes massive crashing. My guess is it probably has to do with all the extra mercenary clans that I added, mixed in with that mercenary contract length and all these other ones. So when they get eliminated, it's probably just causing the crash. So for this specific mod list, do not use Separatism. It's a good mod though, if you can get it to work for maybe a different mod list. But anyways, do not use Separatism with this mod list. And that's the full list of mods. Again, thank you to War Thunder for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to click the links in the description to get a ton of amazing bonuses for new PC and console players or returning players who haven't played in the last 6 months. Let me know in the comments if there's a mod you swear by that didn't make the list, and I'll check it out for the next video. If you haven't seen the full campaign this mod list was used for, you can check it out on screen now. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.